Today we will focus on transition-rich IEPs, the components of course of study, and transition activities. What are transition activities and why are they important? Transition Services Flowchart shows that the age-appropriate transition assessments have identified the needs, strengths, preferences, and interests of the student. Then you write post-secondary goals that are measurable in education, training, employment, and independent living as appropriate. Next, in the flowchart, you will identify transition services. These services are a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that will prepare them from the move from school to post-school life. These are services and activities that will help the student develop the skills they need to successfully reach the post-secondary goals. Transition services aim to prepare your student for whatever he or she will go on to do after leaving the school system. Every student is unique and will require individualized transition services and activities. To prepare you for the transition planning process, we're going to go through explanations of the categories of transition services appearing on the IEP. Along with definition, we will also include examples of an appropriate transition service. Let's take a look at what the law requires. The law requires that the coordinated set of activities must be based on the individual student's needs, taking into account the student's strength, preference, and interest. If we have done the transition assessment appropriately, then we are making plans for the coordinated set of activities or transition activities to be based on the student's needs and include instruction, related services, community experiences, the development of employment and other adult living objectives, and if appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills and provision of a functional vocational evaluation. These terms should be familiar because these are on the transition component. We'll take a look at that in just a second. So when you take a look at the IEP, there's a checklist called the Indicator 13 checklist that looks to make sure that you meet all the requirements for a transition-rich IEP. And question number 4 states, are there transition services in the IEP that will reasonably enable the student to meet his or her post-secondary goal? The reason this is important for us to look at is there are 3 yes and no's here. Are there transition services in all 3 areas? If the student has an education or training goal, there must be transition services to meet that goal, as well as employment and independent living. And then it says, is a type of instruction, related service, community experience, or development of employment and other post-school adult living objectives, and if appropriate, acquisition of daily living and provision of functional vocational evaluation listed in association with meeting the post-school goal? And the answer there would be yes or no. So this is the checklist that we look at when we make sure that we are developing appropriate post-secondary goals and plans for our students. So, what activities did you do in high school? The point of this is to demonstrate the wide range of experiences available to a high school student. Not all activities that may help a young person transition to adult life actually occur on the school campus. Think about all of the lessons and skills that you may have learned outside of that school building. Everything a student does during teenage years is transition related. Take a look at some of the examples here. This reinforces the philosophy that everything a young person does in middle school and high school is transition. Actually, the argument could probably be made that everything a child does from the time he or she is born is getting ready him or her for their adult life. Often, school personnel, we focus on what happens during the school hours and only the things that are offered during those times. Instead of trying to fit all students into a single transition planning process and a menu of services, there should be a process in place that focuses on designing an appropriate array of services and curricular options designed to fit student needs. So every aspect of the child's life should be explored to discover possibilities. So, what are transition activities? They should focus on academic and functional achievement to facilitate movement from school to post-school life. This is a coordinated set of activities, like we said, that helps them get to those post-school activities. This appropriate transition services drive the course of study and address the post-school goals. And for each post-secondary goal, transition activities can include instruction, related service, community experience, employment, and adult post-school objectives, acquisition of daily living, and functional vocational evaluation. Students differ from one another in terms of the nature and severity of their disability, personality, abilities, cultural values, and interests. Therefore, the type and amount of transition activities will also differ from student to student. When determining transition activities and services, you should ask yourself these questions. What experiences must the student participate in this academic school year that are necessary for achieving the identified post-secondary goals? 2. What services and specific instruction are essential this year for the student to develop skills and knowledge to attain their post-secondary goals? And 3, do we know enough about the student's vocational skills to identify an appropriate post-secondary employment goal or design activities to support the identified goal? And where do we put these transition activities and services? It's in Section D of the transition component listed here. This is where you document in your transition area the transition activities under instruction, related services, community experiences, employment, adult living skills, daily living skills if appropriate, and functional vocational evaluation if appropriate. Let's take a look at each one of the categories. Instruction. Education and instruction will be provided to the student to build the skills necessary to reach post-secondary goals. This could include the general and special ed courses to meet their requirements, advanced courses, career or tech courses, remediation courses, as well as social skill and self-advocacy training. Instruction as a transition service is a broad range of activity that promotes access to school curriculum, help them gain the skills that they need to move towards those post-secondary goals. Instruction around the acquisition of daily living skills may be needed for some students who need preparation for specific life skills such as self-care, money management, or transportation. Related services. These are the supports such as psychology, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, assistive technology, rehabilitative counseling, travel training, those type things that students need to access more integrated work, education, and living environments. Related services within the context of transition services is to help students and families determine if related services are needed beyond high school. Help identify who or what agencies might provide those services, and help identify how the student or parent can access those services and make the connections needed prior to them leaving school. A variety of activities and experiences that are provided outside the school building are community experiences. These might include resources utilized as part of the student's program, whether during school hours or after school, to achieve the stated outcome of community integration and community participation. So are they volunteering? Are they doing tours of colleges, residential, recreation, leisure activity? What type activities are students engaged in to meet the outcome of community participation or integration? With a major focus on career planning, these services help the student develop, define, refine, and finalize his or her post-secondary goals. Assessments, experiences, and planning activities are key to helping students finalize the goal. This area focuses on the development of work-related behavior, job seeking, and job keeping skills, career exploration, skill training, and actual employment. Volunteer work also provides important skills and experiences that could lead to integrated employment or supported employment. Adult living objectives are those services that include support activities done occasionally, such as accessing employment, support agencies, registering to vote, filing taxes, renting a home, accessing medical services, filing for insurance, college information, or even Social Security income. The acquisition of daily living skills. These are the skills involved in caring for oneself on a daily basis. These skills are an important component of independent living and include activities such as dressing, grooming, hygiene, self-care skills, household chores, shopping, managing finances. How completely the student has mastered daily living skills may ultimately determine the type of living environment selected as most appropriate. Functional vocational evaluation. An additional assessment process if the regular vocational assessment has not provided enough information to make a vocational program decision. Additional assessment activities such as situational assessments, community-based assessments, assistive technology evaluations, or aptitude tests can be performed to get more information about the student's needs, preferences, and interests. Let's look at a few transition activities to meet the transition services in each of the post-school areas. For education and training, we have visit college campus, research scholarships, submit a FAFSA form, research disability services available for college students, use of an agenda to keep track of assignments, either paper, pencil, or electronically, or self-advocacy training. These are all services that meet the requirements if it is related to the post-secondary goal of the student. Transition activities for the services related to the post-secondary goal of employment. We could include paid community work, interest inventory, social skill development, computer skills instruction, mock interviews, filling out job application, referral to Voc Rehab or another adult agency, meet with military recruiter, memorize social security number, phone number, and address. Remember, the law does require that the child's transition services and activities are based on their individual needs, strengths, preference, and interest. So the IEP team must consider that when developing these services and activities. If the student has an independent living post-secondary goal, then we must have transition activities and services to meet that post-secondary goal. So here are some examples. Instruction on public transportation available for work and leisure activities. Literacy instruction related to sight words or survival words. Instruction on availability of clubs or groups that meet and talk about a common interest. For example, you have hiking club, photography club, running club, different things the YMCA or another organization may offer. Social skills training, advocacy training, instruction related to obtaining a driver's license, visit to the DMV. The law does require that transition services include the course of study that is necessary for the student to participate in to achieve the post-secondary goals. The course of study has to align to the post-secondary goals. The course of study should help students meet these goals. A definition of course of study is a multi-year description of coursework to achieve the student's desired post-school goals from the student's current to anticipated exit year. So you can look at that as a long-term plan. What are we going to do between right now and when the student graduates to describe the coursework the student needs to take, and then make the choice of the course of study. So if we look at the transition component for a course of study, that is section B, and you have three options. You either fill in number 1, number 2, or number 3. Unless you have a student that entered 9th grade in 2009-2010, then you will only stick with the 2 courses of study here in North Carolina under number 1. Let's look at this. The student is following a course of study that leads to a high school diploma. So, if your student is pursuing a high school diploma, then you will check one of the boxes listed here: Future Ready Course of Study or Occupational Course of Study. Unless, like I said, that student entered into ninth grade during 2009-2010 school year. Most likely, if you're writing a transition plan right now, your students just fall under those two courses of study. The second option would be the student is following extensions of the standard course of study and pursuing the graduation certificate. And in that case, you would fill out number 2. Or if the student is in middle school and following the North Carolina Standard Course of Study or the extensions of the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, you would fill out number 3. Those are your options for course of study. A transition-rich IEP includes the following components. It begins with adequate transition assessment information and well-written present level of academic and functional achievement. From the assessment information, post-secondary goals, annual IEP goals, and transition services are derived. And finally, responsibility for providing services are designated. You're well on your way to writing a transition-rich IEP.